One of the things that we like to make at home is sushi. Recently, we started making pressed sushi. Now, this stuff is delicious. Basically, rice and fish is squished in a box, and afterwards you can torch it. You can do all kinds of wonderful things to it. To make the pressed sushi, you need a little wooden box. I'm going to show you how to make that little wooden box, and immediately afterwards, we're going to make some pressed sushi, and you can see exactly how it works. I really wanted to use cedar wood to build the box. Cedar has that really fish-friendly vibe to it. It's nice and soft, it's beautiful, it works really well. My father-in-law gifted me with a few cedar logs that actually he'd been patiently air drying in his basement for 5 years. The first thing I did is use the bandsaw to cut the logs into planks. To safely make the first cuts, I screwed the log onto a reference board, and from there I could sort of stably cut a 90-degree angle. So after the stable surface was created, I could much more safely proceed to cut the log into 1-inch thick planks. This was actually the first time I'd ever done it, and I really like just being able to create planks out of a log. The yield was pretty damn good. I got 5 planks and a few interesting offcuts. I used a moisture meter to confirm that this log was indeed dry, and damn, it was dry as an old bone. I chose one of the boards that had some interesting wavy quarter-sawn grain. It sort of reminded me of water, and again, it fed into what the purpose is going to be. So I mapped out a little section. I used the sliding table saw to slice off the veiny live edge, and then I went through the process of milling it flat. First the jointer to square up 2 sides, and then the planer to bring it to a final thickness of 3/4 of an inch. The final step is the table saw for a 3-inch wide board. And then I used the crosscut sled to make the 4 sides of the box. With my box components assembled, it was time to consider joinery. You need some kind of decently strong joint here because the squishing process will put the box under some pressure. So I ended up choosing loose tenons, and that will be plenty strong for this type of application. I used a router jig to cut slots into the opposing faces, and then small tenons are fitted into the slots, and that joins the box together. Before gluing the box, I had one more element to cut, probably the most important stylistic element and also functional element, the knife slots in the side walls of the box. These slots, I think they look really cool by the way, but they also allow you to cut the pressed sushi more accurately while it's still inside the container. My goal here was to completely stop any tear out from the saw blade entering and exiting the cut. What I did is I bound the 2 sides together with tape, and then I added 2 hardboard pieces to the outside. Afterwards, as expected, the cuts were breathtakingly tear-out free. I mean, really, it looks like a laser cut them out. The tops and bottoms are free-floating, and they're very straightforward. I just cut pieces slightly smaller than the openings, and I added little feet to the bottom and little handles on top. As always with softwood, I use pads for every clamping operation so I don't dent the delicate surface of the cedar. After that, I resolved some of the offsets with sanding and applied a food-safe butcher's block oil for the finish. One thing I do when I'm using softwood is I find myself just babying the wood all along the process. I'm very careful not to make any dents. And that really only goes as far as its time on my workbench. As soon as it leaves the shop, it's going to get destroyed. It's softwood. It doesn't have the hard surface of hardwood. So I really baby it right up until the point where it's birthed, and then it's off to get dented as much as it wants to be. Okay, enough of this. Let's make some pressed sushi. The main ingredients are very simple. Part 1 is sushi rice flavored with seasoned vinegar. The second part is sashimi grade fish like salmon. Salmon works really well. To cook the rice, I use a good quality rice cooker, but you can also cook it on a pot on the stove. The rice cooker makes the process infinitely easier and more accurate. After the rice is cooked, I flavor it with seasoned rice vinegar, which is basically rice vinegar with salt and sugar added. For safety, you should always obtain what's called sashimi grade fish, which is fish that a reputable seller will guarantee is safe to eat raw. Here I'm just cutting about 300 grams of salmon into thin slices. I also make up some mayonnaise and sriracha mixed together to add to the top. First, I line the box with saran wrap so the rice doesn't stick to the inside walls. This just makes for a cleaner operation. I add a good layer of rice and then the salmon strips on top. I use the top of the box to press. You don't want to spare the pressing force here. I press very firmly. You really want that rice and fish to be squished into a little brick. I make some initial cuts using the knife walls as a guide. Afterwards, you can just pull everything apart, unwrap the pressed sushi, and continue the cuts on a cutting board. I'm going to torch these rolls with a small cake torch. But first, I add the sriracha mayonnaise to the top, and then sprinkle a small amount of sugar. The sugar will caramelize and add a nice initial sweetness to the bite. You can really go to town torching the tops. Don't worry if it kicks up too much flame. It takes a good long time to even develop some basic carbon scoring on the surface. Afterwards, I add a shredded chili pepper to the top as garnish. Other good garnish ideas include green onion, sesame seeds, even jalapeno peppers work really well. And now it's time to enjoy. This is a great project if you make sushi at home and also have an interest in woodworking. It's actually one of the simplest boxes you can make. Before this, I was using a much more primitive version of the box, but I'm glad that I finally made a nicer version. Thanks for watching, and if you made it this far in the video, please don't forget to subscribe.